Welcome to the School of Love, the place where miracles are normal. Hello and welcome to the School of Love, the place where we learn practical tools based on scientific research towards improving ourselves, living life to its fullest, and contributing to the best of our abilities to the world around us. I am Dr. Maria Grajdian, and I'm a professor of media studies and anthropology at Hiroshima University. In my free time, I am doing my best to guide you in building up a life of contentment, joy, and fulfillment while applying lessons learned in school to overcome the difficulties, challenges, and insecurities of the real world. In today's video, I talk about the situation in which you observe that you might have a thick shadow. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, in German, der Schatten, helps us understand those people who act out completely out of their character and out of the blue, precisely in those situations in which better judgment is expected and necessary. Robert Greene, in his masterpiece, The Laws of Human Nature, gives as an example of a person with a thick shadow, former President Richard Nixon, who will forever be connected with the Watergate scandal in the first half of the 1970s, which also forced him, as the only president in the history of the United States of America, to resign very soon after being elected for a second presidency term. If we know what we look for, it is quite easy to observe thick shadows in others. We usually describe people with thick shadows as repressed or rigid, and the thicker the shadow, the more repressed and rigid they appear, which is even more striking when they let loose, mostly under the influence of alcohol as the most socially acceptable means to relax. However, it is much more difficult to observe it in ourselves, because good old ego stays in the way. I start my explanation with a definition of the shadow and how people with a thick shadow appear to those around them and how they are formed. Then I deliver 5 plain steps in finding a way of healthily dealing with one's shadow, which in time, at least in my experience, leads to a gradual thinning of the shadow and its subsequent integration in one's individuality. By the end of the video, you will have a complete protocol of dealing with a thick shadow in yourself if you choose to. So I have a separate video on how to deal with a thick shadow in other people, but remember that always any sort of healing procedure, any thought of healing journey starts with the decision to do so, and this decision is always a personal one, cannot be imposed or coerced from the outside. And now, first things first, that is 2 important disclaimers. The first disclaimer serves to strongly emphasize the fact that this YouTube channel, the School of Love, is not part of my educational and research activities at Hiroshima University. It is nonetheless part of my privilege, joy, and sense of duty to propagate and implement knowledge, information, as well as motivation and inspiration outside the limited framework of academic endeavors. Together, we can build up a better tomorrow for as many of us as possible. The second disclaimer relates to the fact that I am a trained musician and musicologist, not a psychologist, therapist, or counselor. The ideas I am sharing in my videos reflect my deep-going preoccupation with life, my own life and other people's lives, and express the results of my experience, research, and for better or for worse, my failures and my recovery from those failures. Recovery which is still ongoing. The ideas expressed in the videos on this channel named The School of Love cannot and may not and must not replace the consultation with specialists in whichever areas of your life you might have questions or you might struggle with. If you are new to this channel, at this moment I would like to ask you to please consider subscribing, sharing, liking, commenting. Thank you very, very much. This helps us not only with that mysterious algorithm, which seems to dominate the YouTube galaxy, but also with contributing to the expansion of the community of humans doing their best to impact positively the world and those around them by discovering their authentic selves and living life wholeheartedly. Thanks again. And now back to today's topic, which is how what happens when you have a thick shadow, you yourself have a thick shadow, and how to deal with it. So usually when we talk about people with thick shadows, we refer to others, as I have mentioned before, as rigid or repressed. And what makes it this phenomenon of thick shadows so weird is the fact that these people, they behave like perfect citizens usually, and then they, during a party or an outing with colleagues or friends, every time they get really drunk and then they behave completely out of character. Or again, model citizens, perfect life, perfect family, perfect social involvement, and then they get angry and they explode and they say things and behave in that anger in ways in which you think, this looks like a completely different person, this is not the one I know, what's happening? Or let's say in intimate relationships, these are the people who outside they look like composed and model citizens, but then in intimate relationships they have all sorts of problems, and but they're not necessarily like aggressive, but they're extremely submissive when outside in public spheres they are very domineering. So there's a huge discrepancy between how they usually appear, let's say in the public sphere, and how they appear either under conditions of stress or extreme stress or in intimate relationships. This is how we see people. This is what it means to be a people with a person with a shadow. And the thicker the shadow, the greater this discrepancy. So what does it mean? The shadow I'm referring to is, of course, is not the shadow produced by light. The shadow is this Carl Jung's concept of der Schatten, and is this part of our being which has been repressed, well, cut away in the process of us growing up. What's interesting, so usually when you think of the shadow, you think of dark things, dark secrets, dark sides of ourselves which we don't want to see, we don't want to acknowledge, which are actually antisocial, and this is why they have been repressed in the process of growing up. And so all this, but that's not the case. Also, good things belong to the shadow always. If you live in a society which does not appreciate, or in a over individual, in a community, in an over individual setting which does not appreciate creativity, then you'll push away that creativity, or you will be forced as a child to push away that creativity, which is a good thing, right? But it will become part of your shadow. Or let's say you live in a society or in a community which does not, or in a family which does not appreciate spontaneity or warm-heartedness, which are fundamental things to display in a society, yeah? Or empathy. Yeah? So all those elements, that's why I say not only bad things, but antisocial elements are pushed into the shadow in the course of our educational and formative years, but also the positive ones. And these things, these parts of our individuality, or of what makes us us, they are not just cut away. They are not destroyed and somehow they disappear. They go deep into ourselves and they form this shadow. So what happens is, so why is it so important, the shadow, and why is it such a new phenomenon? Again, because we live long lives, and the longer we live, the less we are in touch, or the less we can take advantage, metaphorically speaking, of this primordial vitality which each of us is equipped with when we are born. And this lasts until 25 years. I would say 25 years we are moving driven by that primordial vitality, but afterwards it starts to fade away. And after the age of 35, I would say roughly plus minus, after the age of 35, this vitality um, is completely gone. So unless we do something about it, it is when the shadow will take over more and more. It will become more and more powerful, and it will start to control our lives more and more. This is why after the age of plus minus 35, I would say, you'll see people decaying meaning deteriorating. You'll see people start to have all sorts of mental health problems. People start to have all sorts of physical health problems. People start to age very quickly, and not in a dignified manner. You'll meet people who seem normal until the age of 35. Suddenly they will start behaving erratically, and as someone who has reached the beautiful age of 45, after 45 this becomes increasingly obvious. This is why it is necessary to do something about it. And so the shadow is everything we have been forced to push away of ourselves in the course of our formation. Small children, the process is more or less ended until the age 7, 8, when we start this real socialization through formal education. But it doesn't go away, it stays within us. As long as we're young, we can keep it under control. It's not about keeping it under control. We are strong enough to behave socially without having to put in any effort. But the older we get, the less energy and strength we have to do this. So it starts to bubble up and to resurface. This is the rule. Of course, there are exceptions in the first phase. So of course, there are people who behave erratically from the very beginning, which simply means mostly that they have been formed very much against their own instincts. But usually, for most people, this resurfacing or surfacing of the shadow happens after the age of 35, and even more powerfully, even more strongly, even more irresistibly after the age of 45. So what can we do about it? We have to deal with it. So Eckhart told us adage or ideas: if you have a problem, you either accept it, live it, or solve it. So we cannot leave ourselves. The shadow is part of who we are. We cannot accept it because it ruins our life, so we have to do something, change it. We cannot change it, so we have to integrate it. Integrating it is, so we have to bring it back into our consciousness. This is what we have. This is what it means, integrating your shadow. I'm not trying now to replace any psychologist ideas or psychiatrist idea. No, I'm just trying to bring it to common awareness and find very practical ways and explain very practical ways of dealing with it. How I managed to deal with it, or how I have been managing. I'm still working on that. So integrating the shadow means bringing all these elements which are forming the shadow, shaping the shadow, into your awareness, into your conscious mind, and accepting them. Once they are in your conscious mind, you can accept them, you can deal with them. So the first step is, of course, as I have mentioned, awareness. Every time either you or those around you will start telling you at some point, the other day you didn't behave quite like yourself. Is everything okay? Once you hear this, maybe once, twice, 3 times, when you hear this, something is wrong. There's something going on. And this is awareness. Yeah, you will start. There will be signs. You will start having insomnia. You will start doing things which are out of your character. I don't know, maybe you're, as I said, a role model for your social circle. You're a model citizen. I don't know, maybe you start watching porn, which is one of the strongest signs of a repressed sexuality. Maybe you start drinking too much, which is again a very strong sign of repressed, creativity or inventivity. Maybe, who knows, you'll start going online on online dating sites, which is again a very strong of repressed sexuality. So there are many ways of observing that something is wrong, and then this will serve as the element to bring it into awareness. Not with, don't push it back, because it will be, by pushing it back, it only makes it stronger. And once you have realized it's a different me there, you have to identify what exactly brings it, what exactly makes you act or think or speak out of your character. So this is kind of what we might call a trigger. It's not bad, it's not good, but observe it. Observe start to monitor yourself, to observe yourself. It will be exhausting, but it is a very necessary procedure. And then observe what you get out of behaving the way you normally behave. So when it is in your repressed state, in a way in a state in which you control yourself, in a state in which you push down the shadow, you'll probably get status, you get money, you get appreciation, you get validation. And so, because once you know where the payoff lays, you'll know how to create that payoff without pushing the shadow down. And this is number 4, is find healthy way to deal with what triggers the shadow to push down, to push up, to come up. And instead of reacting either in an unhealthy way, as you have done, for instance, when you drink alcohol, you become a different person. So stop drinking alcohol, and instead drink tea, and then see what exactly that the alcohol was bringing up into you, and then treat it with compassion. Don't run away from your creativity, if that is. Don't run away from your sexuality. So therapists can help you as much. In therapy is a guiding force, or it helps you navigate, but the entire procedure is upon you. It is a difficult one, particularly if the thicker your shadow, the more difficult and painful it is. And there will be a lot of loss and mourning in the process, because, well, it is usually our immediate caregivers, our parents, our immediate caregivers, who had created that shadow in the first place. So it will be a lot of anger there. It is crucial to stay with all those emotions. This is where a trained therapist might come in handy, to stay with those emotions and learn to really accept them and respect them, and at some point be compassionate towards that side of you which had to be buried deep down in the shadow, in the dark, for so many years. And the final step is, number 5, is to be grateful for the lesson, to be grateful for the shadow, because it did show you things in yourself which you didn't even know they existed. Don't be afraid of who you are. Don't be scared. Don't hate it. No, love it. It is part of you. It is a good, a beautiful part. Very, very often we bury deep down things which are very huge treasures for ourselves and for those around us. And we really must learn to accept, not only to accept, but to love, to also to appreciate and to feel that gratitude towards those parts of ourselves still being there. This is when integrating the shadow, the process of integrating the shadow starts. When we acknowledge the parts of the shadow, and then bring them back into and then bring them back into who we are. Maybe you start, if you're a very rigid and controlled person, maybe you can start painting something or making videos like I do. It's very therapeutic to make these videos. It helps me externalize all my energy and my thoughts, so I don't have to talk so much with other people who are supposed to listen to me. So it's your creativity will become kind of the voice of your shadow, the voice of those elements which had been hidden away for so long. So that would be for today. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for being here, and I'm looking very forward to welcoming you back again very soon. Love and peace to you all.